thank you for having me. I was excited to be asked to come speak here and talk about the income statement. Um, I've titled this "Classic Income Statement and Power BI Better Together." A little bit about myself. I am originally from Honolulu, Hawaii, and then lived much of my adolescent years in Redmond, Washington, and then currently live in Eugene, Oregon, where I work for Industrial Finishes as an accounting manager. Have always been into analytics with an accounting and finance background, always worked in the accounting department, but had a pull towards data. So have always worked with summarizing large groups of data, trying to bring insights to our leadership. I worked for Industrial Finishes. What we do is we are a wholesale distributor of products and services to the auto body shop industries, RV coach manufacturers, wood products, and aerospace. So essentially, we don't make anything. We buy in bulk and we hold it in a warehouse. We package it up and we bring it out to our customers, body shop being one of our major segments. And we support them in technical application of paint and various finishes, and we sell equipment as well. So one of the big drivers in our company is to be able to bring added value to our customers. And if we have time towards the end, I'll touch on how we've done that. Our footprint across the US is east and west. And I've colored the automotive locations in green. I've highlighted the industrial activity where we're in wood products like wood packaging and abrasives. That's colored in purple, so we're mainly in the south there. Our RV division is in red, so we're in Indiana and a little south there. Aerospace is in Utah, and you can see we have automotive kind of sprinkled all over the place in green. Our company's about 350 employees. We're, as you've seen, in multi-states. So as you can imagine, we have an income statement. It's our main measure of performance, and we have a need to distribute that and engage with our divisional managers over many states. So we use the multi-step format of the income statement. For us, it's very common to have net sales at the top, calculate down to gross income, and then have some subtotals in the middle that amount to pre-tax and net income. So we'll be going through the multi-step format that we use at my company. This is a blurred out copy of an actual income statement that we produce. We do this monthly, and we send a packet out which contains about 40 of these, one for each location. And we're sharing with our managers what their monthly performance is on the left. You can see under the current month here what the year to date is for that fiscal year to date, what the prior fiscal year to date was as a comparative. And then we have this column over here that just calculates out the percentage growth between these 2 years. We also have columns just to the right of each number that represents a percentage of net revenue. So we measure in dollars, but we also measure in relative percentage to net revenue as a measure, so you can compare year over year. And even though the business may fluctuate a little bit in dollars, you can still get a feel for what may be an excessive expense or not. As you can see, we send this out and it's very detailed. There's a lot of rows, a lot of small print, and we're sending it out to our managers that their primary function is working in the field. They may be out selling or doing technical support with our customers, and their primary job isn't to read the income statement. So what we were running into was we would send this all out. We'd do all this work. We'd send these paper statements out, and we'd hear very little back from our managers. So we started having calls with managers monthly to review the statement. And this was just about the time that Power Pivot came out. And when Power Pivot came out, I saw this as an opportunity to bring some automation to our statement, some engagement, right? Some interactiveness. And so we used Power Pivot, and then very early in Power BI, we switched over to Power BI, and we were able to publish our income statement to our users in addition to the paper. So now when we got on the call, we'd walk through this. And I was touting this to our managers as a great opportunity for them to get in, dive deep, and understand what's under your financial statement lines. And it was kind of met with some mixed reviews at first, and we were primarily only going over this on the telephone. And what the feedback started coming back as is that the financial statement users found this difficult to use. And I've of course created this and thought it was wonderful, and thought, well, they just need to be trained on how to drill in. And so we set out an effort to do some pretty intensive training on how to use these arrows up here, right? Because for some reason, for our users out in the field, these weren't logical. These weren't showing up right away. They weren't obvious. And with all these ups and downs, they just weren't sure how to use them. So we do training where we do something like this and say, well, let's just turn the drill down on, right? And then let's go into one of these lines. And every time you click this thing, you're going to get a different level, right? And so we've got this hierarchy set up where every row meant something different. You may or may not have data there, but keep clicking, right? And they'd get to the bottom. And I'd say eventually you're going to get to your detail, right? Perfect, right? You got every month, everything. You can filter by month. You can look by a customer. And we put a lot of effort into this, and it just didn't take off. And the feedback from this was that that our users were just getting lost in the drill down. They didn't know what row they were on. When they rolled back up, they rolled up too far, and they couldn't get back to that classic statement look. So I'll just show you real quick. So we'd roll up, we'd keep going up, and then it'd roll up too far. And then we'd have to train them on how to use the joined arrow to get it back. So this format obviously wasn't working for us as far as self-service and a good engaging document. So we went back to the drawing board. We had used Power BI enough that we decided that it was time that we classify users into different buckets. So we came up with this, and these four groupings were a developer, which would be someone like me. We've also got another developer that I work with now at our company. And then next you have the analyst. And I view this as more of the accounting person that's looking for insights and trying to answer questions on their own. And then you've got the stakeholder, who may be the owner or senior manager, and they're looking to receive insights or consume insights. And then you finally have who I would classify as the explorer, and that person is not as technical as the analyst, but they may be in payroll, they may be in accounts receivable, and they're using this tool to kind of automate a monthly routine that they already do. And so we have all four roles at our company. And one light bulb moment for us was when we realized that by giving them that first iteration of the financial statement, we were really asking that stakeholder or that manager to assume or take on an analyst role, right? So we were expecting that they would take that income statement, they would learn how to drill in or have a good enough reason to learn that, and they'd get into the detail when they, in reality, they weren't. We later, kind of a side project, would take Power BI out to our body shop customers. You go out to body shops, you got a lot of mom and pops that aren't necessarily analytical, but we were learning from them as stakeholders what got them to engage or kind of lean forward in their chair. And it was when we were able to bring visuals in Power BI and combine that with storytelling. So we set out to bring that back to our managers and use that to kind of revamp how we approach this thing. And one thing that we learned and set out as a goal was that trying to reinvent the statement that they've been used to looking at for 10 to 20 years, what wasn't bringing us adoption. It wasn't the easiest transition for our managers. So we said, what if we gave them a dashboard that when they opened it, it looked exactly like their paper or very close to their paper. So they could have their paper in front of them that they're used to, and then kind of look to Power BI as a financial statement reader. It would complement that paper, right? And so that was one of our goals, was to have it mirror our paper. The other goal was that if we had it electronic, could we bring some insights just right on the face of that thing, where they could look at the paper, they could look at the screen, and within a minute know exactly what's important to look at on that month statement. And then another thing that we learned was that they just didn't want to navigate it. They wanted to click it. They wanted to click the panel on the dashboard. They wanted to have the report open up, and they wanted to see what looked like their paper statement for that month. So that involved a lot of custom time intelligence. And then finally, what we'd learned from our customers was we were using Power BI not as much for the data. I mean, we would get on the same page with our data with our customers, but then we transitioned to this conversation where we were solving problems. We were brainstorming with them, and it was a great opportunity on that side. So our final objective with this new format was that we would move from data to dialogue pretty quickly and just start talking about setting goals and solving problems. So we came up with and by the way, if anyone's got questions, feel free to interrupt me. My plan is that I'm just going to go through a typical session with our statement and kind of highlight some of the areas, and then get into more of the technical how we did it kind of things. So please feel free. So this is our new reader, right? And this allowed us to get the paper in front of us, and you look at this thing, and it's got the same columns. Let me see if I can make this a little bigger. It's got the same columns, and it's got some color, and then it's got some additional options. But when you open this thing up, when you get that June statement or whatever month you're on, and you open this thing up and it's refreshed, it refreshes to match your paper. And it does that by using custom time intelligence against our GL, and it makes it so it defaults open to the current statement. But we've got the classic statement here where we've got sales at the top, we've got some discounts, and we've got some other items that get us to net sales here. And this is just a classic matrix. And then we've got a group called cost of goods sold, and we've got all the cost elements in there. And we also worked hard to find a way to insert custom subtotals into the matrix. When I looked online, you've got 100 examples of like a retail sales example, and the classic sales table, customer table, location and time. You have very little out there in terms of financial statement or GL information. And thus you have very few examples that kind of focus on using the matrix to recreate a financial report. But one of the shortcomings of that is not being able to subtotal in your matrix without doing some workarounds. So I tried a couple. I tried a couple methods that I found online. We finally did a hybrid version of this, and it works pretty well for us. So we'll talk about that a little later. We've got payroll, we've got selling, we've got a big section for operating expense, other income and expense, and then we have more subtotals. Net before allocation. We have the actual allocation, and then finally a subtotal for net income and a grand total for net income. It defaults out to a year-over-year comparison. So what we're looking at is fiscal year-to-date numbers in the prior column and the current fiscal year-to-date in the current column. And then here's those percentages where we compare every line relative to our net revenue line right here. Net revenue being 100%, and then payroll, for instance, at the subtotal is about 10% of net revenue, where here it was a little over 10%. Our financial statement users look at these and they know what payroll should be as a percentage. But another question might be, as I work my way down the statement, how much margin do I have left? For those that work in distribution, you probably know that we live and die by the gross margin percentage. Anything below 20 is considered not making money, even though that's debatable. But distribution really hangs their hat on this figure right here, this gross margin. So what we did in order to get an idea of how our gross margin percentage erodes as we go down our statement was we've got some disconnected slicers up here that change the look of these columns. So if I click margin up here, it looks for a subtotal or any line that has more than one label in it, and it converts to how much margin you have left. Let me make sure that changed. Percentage of margin. Well, that I don't see a change there. But the idea is that when you click that, it would take your gross margin, and at these green subtotal lines, it would calculate what's remaining. I'll have to look at that off this call. And then another option was that we wanted to take this year-over-year comparison and be able to flip it and compare month over month. So if we're in June, we'd be looking at this June versus last June. And by clicking that, it should give you the current month. Oh, it's thinking. I couldn't see that it was thinking. All right, so it takes some time to crunch. I think it may be a little slow on Teams too. So there we go. So now we're looking at the current month of June. Over here, you can see in the detail, we're comparing the 64 in the current month gross revenue right there to the prior year's month of 60. So some neat toggles there. And then the third toggle was if we wanted to compare our current month to like a running average of our statements over the last 3 months, we could click the average option. And when this comes back, you'll see that this current month stays the same, but the prior comparison is going to be a 3-month average of the last 3 months, right? So 3 ways to kind of flip this thing. But the main thing for our readers was that we didn't leave this screen. they could always look at their paper and look up at this thing and know that they could tie these numbers. And that was huge for adoption for us. Then we get into some variance columns here where we're able to calculate the difference between these relative percentage changes and look at the variance up or down. And then we did the same thing with the dollars and said, are we up or down? One thing that you might need to do, we had to do this in certain areas of our GL, but we decided that we were going to reflect this thing where every positive dollar was an inflow and every negative dollar was an outflow. And so sometimes when your GL has debits or credits or has these signs mixed up, you've got to go through and kind of do a custom calculation to get those to snap into place. But every positive dollar here is income. Every minus is a draw from income, which means that when we do our variances, they're consistent in direction. We added conditional coloring on top of these, and when we'd have our calls, we would just be able to quickly go up and down this thing and look and see what was favorable or unfavorable change to our income statement for that month. And so the language that we started using during our reviews of the statement was if it's red and red, right? You've got red variance there and red variance on the dollars. That was an unfavorable change. And we set these conditions at a limit where if you saw red, it was probably worth looking at, right? Whereas on the paper statement, you had no conditional formatting, no coloring. We didn't have a dollar variance line to look at how material the change was. But on this statement, we could quickly go down and see what's going on with repairs and maintenance. Why is that at the year level so unfavorable, right? Well, we want a detail. Our users wanted detail and they liked it, but they didn't like drilling into this main statement. So we created a side table that we squeezed in here, and it's also a matrix, but it groups it by financial statement group and then by month, by historic month. So since in this example we're through June, so we're through the complete current year, we've got the current month dollars, and then we've got the prior month dollars. And when we find something that's unfavorable or favorable that we want to look at, we're able to find that line, click on that row while maintaining our statement, and then it cross filters over here and actually conditionally colors what's unfavorable year over year by month. And so regardless of if you're looking at this at the month level or the year level, you're able to come back here and kind of get an idea of what the history was month over month. And then if you want to drill in further and get details, you can expand one of those months. And what this references in my GL table is a custom column where I'm constantly referencing the current line or GL line that we're on. And depending on the line that we're on, it's going to concatenate and bring back key information. So I don't have to do multiple drill downs on this matrix to get to the comment, right? Or get to the document number. So what I've done is on every expense line, since most include vendors and document numbers, and I apologize if this is small to read, but I've got a leading V for vendor. I've got a leading D and a number sign for document number. And then I've brought in the relevant comment. This panel over to the right proved very popular with our managers because it was just the right level of detail with just the right level of effort that they were willing to put into this. So this was a great way to kind of quickly go through the statement with a manager, or have the manager do it on their own, and be able to see if there's anything worth asking accounting over. And I want to show another drill down feature. We've got gross sales here that involves customers, and we've got point of sale discounts all up in the sales grouping. And when you expand one of those months, you will see a drill down layer, but you'll notice that instead of having a document number, right, because we'd have a lot of sales orders pop out there, the custom column in my GL table knows that I'm in a sales field and that we're talking about customer. So all I'm bringing back as a result into that column is the customer name. All we're concerned about is what they bought in total, or what we gave them in discount in total, and making sure that those deals are what we expect them to be. So little manipulation with a simple calculated column to help avoid having a matrix have too many layers or too many unnecessary clicks.
Hi, Mark. Just to let you know, there's a few questions in the chat.
Oh, sure.
Firstly,
I'd love to
just a few. If you're okay, take them as we go. There was one about, a few people have asked the same one about the conditional formatting for the change and how you did it. There's 3 people who have asked that question.
Yeah.
So if you're able to elaborate a little bit more on that, or you're going to cover it later when you look at it. The technical side.
Yeah. Back when our GL numbers kind of flip-flop between negatives and positives, I wrote an elaborate measure that would flag if something was a favorable change or an unfavorable change. So I had a measure prior to this where I would use 1 as a positive, 0 as a negative, and I just worked down to that point where I would color things red or green based on favorable. And that was very complex, but possible, because you can go into the conditional formatting of some of these types of conditions and peg them against a different measure in your model. So this is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So we'll take percentage difference. So when you select the column that you want to do conditional formatting on, you've got these options where you can toggle on and off for background color, font color, and data bars. And when you go into the advanced, I've done it with background colors where I've been able to assign a separate measure as the plus or minus, or the favorable or unfavorable. In this one, I've simply assigned green for the positive, red for the negative, and let the program determine how big those bars are, right? You can come in here and you can custom select what your min and your max are to kind of create how big or small you want those bars, or how responsive you want those bars to be. For this one, I just simply went into the formatting, the conditional format for that measure, and then chose data bars and just let the formatting format it with those colors. I don't know if that answers it, or if there's a follow-up to that. But that's the basic way to do conditional formatting. The more elaborate way would be if you had something that wasn't numeric, like text, and you still wanted to conditionally format that based on, say, sales growth. So say I had names of salespeople, and Tom went up, but John went down, and I want to color their name. There is a way that you can conditionally format text, but then point it to that growth measure for the red or the green or what have you.
Thanks, Mark. That's really comprehensive explanation. We've got lots of great good reaction in the chat. I don't know if you want to carry on. There's some more questions, but I don't know if you want to carry on and then answer them at the end, or whether you want to continue with take another question now.
Well, yeah, I'll take another question. I've got a lot of technical topics, but the questions may be asking them, and I'd rather focus on those first if that's possible.
Yeah, great. I'll don't know if you got the chat up, but I'll try and phrase it. So there's one from Mark Chapman on about how you configure the transaction detail to keep it manageable. I read that as it being a sort of a data modeling question, but Mark, I don't know if you want to elaborate more on that and take yourself off mute. So Mark Chapman, that is.
Yeah, Mark.
Sure.
So you were showing us how you'd done the sales at a summary level, and there was more detail in the maintenance. So the background of that would be interesting, and how you decided where to draw the line.
Yeah, sure. So I basically have a detail column that I created because you've got multiple columns out here, one for document, one for vendor, one for document type. And I basically just created a calculated column in my table that looked conditionally for certain GL codes or GL row numbers. Okay, so what I did was I have the GL with with a lot of detailed accounts, but I have that with a relationship to my financial order table, right? And my financial order table has better groupings than I have in my GL. And so if we look at the financial order table, and the financial order table is really what makes the matrix hold the sort order of the financial statement. But when we look at this table, I take every GL account and I related it based on the statement description, and you may have a GL number or a chart number that you want to reference back to your GL table. But once you make that reference, you've got the ability to create a group column, a statement type column, in case you have a balance sheet in here too. You've got lines of your statements, and then it gives you the ability to put sort orders or custom sort orders for each of those groups and each of those lines. So I put a column for group. So all sales was grouped at the top, order 1. Cost of goods sold came next, 2. But then I have a separate column for each line. And so when I go back to my GL and I'm looking to customize how that first level matrix description pops out, and I go to my detail in my measure, I'm simply looking back to the related sort order table, and I'm saying that every line order that's greater than 1 and less than 5 gets a certain treatment. And then otherwise, and that treatment is related customer name coming from the customer table. I don't know about you guys, but with our company, we have a parent customer name, and then we have sub accounts that they use for different purposes. The sub accounts show up in our GL, not the group name, not the parent name. So I'm looking back to the related customer name, and I'm pulling that out for every financial statement item that lands between say gross sales and customer discount. I'm pulling back customer name. And then for everything else that's in the body of the financial statement, I pull back the vendor and the document number.
That's great, thank you.
Also, Mark, I'm not sure if you're going to show this, but could you show how you've done the subtotals as well? So the margins, the cost of goods sold.
Yeah, that's a great question. I've got a little panel that I kind of mocked up as kind of my progression in trying to figure this out. But basically, and we've got test we've got test margins in here that just kind of go through my thought process. So for this first table visual, I created a test margin calculation, and I took this from a technique online where they were just writing calculate statements for every subtotal. So in our statement, we have margin, we have say pre-tax or pre-allocation, and then net income. But I would create a dedicated subtotal measure and use a calculate statement off of the GL sum, and then for my filters, say filter it for anything that's in the sales bucket or the cost bucket. And if you deal with calculate a lot, you know that by writing a filter like that, you're basically using the overwrite function in calculate. And so the result of that in my table, if I just put that test margin in here for every line in my order table, including a custom line for margin in that order table, it's always going to return gross margin. No matter if I'm on the selling, sales, margin, or cost, I always get the same result. So the trick was to come up with another measure that would be smart enough to know when it's on that margin line.
Yeah.
So, sorry.
That's okay. I'm just agreeing with you. That's the way to do it. Yeah.
So I write that custom margin, and then I write a switch measure here where I'm always looking at that selected value or that current line number that I'm on in the statement. And I just write a switch here where I look to that variable or that line, that order number, and I say when the result is 2.5, which is my margin line, bring that measure back. Otherwise, bring back the GL. And what that lets me do now is bring in selling as it is, sales as it is, but when it hits margin, that override calculate will kick in, and only on that row it'll produce that.
Yeah,
now,
cool.
When I was building the statement, I thought, well, that's brilliant. That's margin. That's exactly what I want. I don't see why this is so difficult. Well, when you build out your statement and you bring in your group header, and then your line, that margin disappears. I thought, well, that's not great. And so, and I'll go through the matrix too. So that was the second challenge. And then the third challenge was, how do I bring this into the matrix where I get that margin to show up there? It's not showing up here. It's showing up here because in the matrix, when you have a subtotal, we aren't filtering on this line item or this line name in the subtotal of margin. So it does allow that simple measure to pass through here where it wouldn't here. And so what I needed to solve for was, if this is bringing additional filter context into my table and my measure can't see or can't reach that group name because of that filter context, then I'm going to go into my test margin measure and have to account for that. So the answer to this whole thing is that we need to put in some remove filters so it ignores those additional lines or columns that are creating filter context. And I won't show it on the matrix just for interest in time, but when I did this, when I removed filters, great. Let me try that again. Test margin. Get rid of that. So you'll notice that I'm removing filters on the line name, and when this refreshes, my margin should come back. So for this test 2 table, it works. It repeats margin and it comes through. It's able to see back to the group name. But then for the matrix, if I stopped right here, what I recognized was that if I want to fix this matrix to reflect the right sort order, and I went into my test financial order table, and I decided that I was going to sort group name, the group name field, by the group number. And then I was going to sort the line name by the line number. Unless I did a remove filter on line number and on group number, even though it's not showing on your matrix, it would have had that same error or that same behavior that we saw back there, where it just wouldn't produce that gross margin. So that took a bit for me to realize that when I was sorting my statement, sales, costs, margin, selling, every time I'd sort in the matrix, even though I had originally seen this at the subtotal, it was hiding this because DAX and Power BI, when you sort your tables like that and you send that to the engine, it's almost taking that sort field with it and including it in the filter context, even though you don't see it. So between those 3 tables, I was able to figure out how to bring in subtotals.
Cool. Yeah, that's really interesting. Thanks, Mark. I've got a similar approach actually. I used the sort order to actually use the subtotals as well. So I applied a filter on the sort order to say where it's less than the current sort order.
Right.
To be able to do that. So I'll post a link to a video that I've done on that technique as well. But I like seeing how other people have done it because it's interesting to see the different ways.
Yeah, that's great. Any more questions on the reader?
I don't think so. Let's carry on.
Okay, great. Well, this is all available on my blog, storybi.com, and you're welcome to go out there, scroll to the bottom of this post where it says financial statements, Power BI better together. Scroll down to the bottom, you'll see the file. There's a lot of DAX in here, a lot of time intelligence. Like I was saying, to get this thing to open up and default to the current statement, for me, took a lot of custom time intelligence. I use a date table, and I'll just show you one of the time intelligence measures. I'm calculating out that prior month, and it has to take into account the statement type, the optional rollback month. So you'll notice that even though it opens current, you've got a month selection here where you can go back into prior months and it will roll back. So this time intelligence measure is made up of a bunch of variables that I've done my best to comment out, but it walks through accommodating all the selections made and then resulting in the right dollar measure to bring back. So this one ends up just choosing between the statement format, accommodating for rollback, and then bringing the amount back. And that's pretty much all I had, unless there are any follow-up questions.
There's a question of, can we create a heat map visual on a single measure for monthly evolution? And also if we want to see the row total and column total. So that's two questions.
The row total and the column total.
Abhishek, do you want to come off mute and just clarify what is it? Two questions there. One is around the heat map visual, and one's around showing both row and column totals on the same visual. I think, from what I'm totals.com correct. Have you done any heat map type visuals with those?
I don't use any specific visuals for heat maps. You saw the map that I used for our territories. Yeah. I typically stick to matrices and doing conditional formatting. We've got another example where we track the ins and outs of our inventory at our various branch locations, and we've got a need to measure paint in gallons going in and out. And I've created a matrix where you look at this thing and you can tell where the issues are. But I primarily use matrix and conditional coloring.
Yeah. So Mark's asking as well, do your teams not want to see more visuals? So like there's not many graphs and charts on here today.
Yeah. So I write about this in one of my blogs where for our company, and I don't know if it's specific to distribution, but our users like 80% tables with numbers and say 20% trending, like line graphs. So it's very common for us to have something that looked like this first iteration of the statement, where we have a big table at the top that represents the financial information and then a trend line down below, because who wouldn't like at some point to be able to click on sales and see the history graphically right there. That's been very important to our storytelling effort. So we do have, I always include some sort of graphic. And in this new reader, I do use a bookmark and a call out up here where someone can look and click on and see an optional graph, and I just put this graph in the sample. But the bars are for profit, and the lines represent each line in the financial statement.
Nice. Okay.
Graphics are important, but for our internal and our external, what we've got the most response from is showing them the hard numbers with colors, with like stoplight colors.
Okay, cool. Yeah, I mean, you're using color quite sparingly there as well, just a few colors to draw attention, right?
Yeah. One thing that we've noticed, and I'll talk a little bit about the dialogue, because we learned this with our customers. One day we just realized that it wasn't so much about the data or the particular mix of graphics and numbers. It was more or less customizing something for your reader to the point where you could get past the numbers faster, right? So where I'm dealing with managers that may hate to look at spreadsheets, they'll look at this because there's conditional formatting to it. And when they roll down and they see something like this, repairs and maintenance, we both agree with this right off the bat. We're on the same page, and then we can move into a discussion where we're looking at that detail and we're solving problems. So in our industry and in body shop, it's the ability to kind of trial and error different formats graphically and with tables, and seeing what the response is has paid off huge for us in getting to the story, right? Because our ultimate goal is that we're making a decision from it, and that's it's been quite the key to open up people's thoughts on things.
Mark, it's okay. I've got one question. You talked a lot about, certainly at the beginning of your talk, about adoption and stuff like that. Do you look at things like usage metrics in sort of track which users are logging on, and how do you use them, or do you not use them at all, and you just do it sort of anecdotally?
Yeah, I may look at the admin side of this maybe once a month. Honestly, I feel like I have a feel internal how adoption's going just based on the questions that I get. If we've got a major sales dashboard that I know is used by between 80 and 100 people, when that thing goes down, it's pretty fun to see how quickly and how many people call me to get that fixed.
Yeah,
but we've got a handful of dashboards that are used daily by a lot of people, by probably 100 people, and then we've got a lot of dashboards that are ad hoc, that we spin up just because we have the ability to, and because it serves someone's need at a low cost, and I know that may be occasionally looked at, but it's not really costing us much to maintain it.
Great, that's a really really comprehensive answer. Thank you very much. Was there another question that's just coming in now? Just having a quick look. Okay. Not sure on that question. So Avinash, are you able to come off mute and just elaborate on your question?
I think he said he's got a problem with his mic.
Okay.
I think it seems like that question was aimed at Mark Champion rather than Mark Walter, actually.
Oh, sorry. Okay.
Cool.
Yeah.
Actually, I've got a question for you, Mark, as well. Have you tried using calculation groups to do some of this stuff as well yet, or?
Yeah. Thank you for asking me that, because that will actually get me more into that. Calculation groups would fit in here perfectly, right? And so I've played around with it. I'm still in the learning stages of calculation groups and some of those external tools, but they are great. You've got Tabular Editor coming out as well as an external tool. I would encourage everyone to stretch their learning, go seek out resources. If you guys don't follow Alex Powers, I would look him up on LinkedIn and go look at some of the learning resources that he's posted on GitHub. He's really taking the external tools by the horn and creating some really effective 1-hour walkthroughs.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, Mark, happy to have a chat about it as well. And I'm just doing the same thing with the learning journey. I've done a few kind of visuals with different groups, and I saw you had some measures there with loads and loads of variables. So I'm thinking performance of those, because DAX isn't particularly efficient at doing all of those, right? So switch statements. So actually, yeah, I think calculation groups could probably help there. But yeah, happy to have a chat and see if we can figure stuff out together if you want.
Oh, for sure. Yeah, I would love that. Yeah.
Cool. It's Alex Powers. I'll put the name in the chat. Just having a quick scroll through. I don't think we've got any other questions. Has anyone else got anything?
No, I think that's the questions. If we close off, we're just about coming up to 7 o'clock now, with a minute to go. Mark, that was hugely insightful, as an accountant and going into Power BI. It's really interesting to see how you approach the problem. So thank you so much for the talk, and really appreciate you coming on. It was really interesting.
It was my pleasure. Thank you so much for having me.
Great.
Brilliant. Thanks everyone.
Thanks. See you soon.
Cheers.